Hi, I'm Joe Shebley, Shebley Aviation, owner of Shebley Aviation. This is my 1952 Beech Model 18 on floats. Today we're out here at Pirate Cove Marina where we're going to break down the systems to the airplane to you and prepare you a little bit for your multi-engine C rating. Okay, as I said, these are Bristol Model 7850s. Basically they're Edo floats, but if they're built in Canada we call them Bristols. And 7850 basically means that each one of these floats are capable of supporting 7,850 pounds of buoyancy per float. The floats are compartmentized. They have 6 compartments. We have these little rubber bilges here, the little balls we pull out. This is our handy dandy float pump. Of course, we always start off by making sure the float pump works. Part of the pre-flight is to pump out the float. Of course, these 7850s are pretty big, so after it's been sitting a while, we also have an electric pump that we use, and it kind of expedites things a little bit. But, just for the purposes of the video here, I'll show you the manual float pump. Each one of these compartments are separated by bulkheads, which go all the way up to the tops. This is one compartment here, separated by a bulkhead, so on and so forth down the road. The compartments are separated, so if we were to hit a log or something, poke a hole in the float, only that bay would sink. Legally, the FAA, as part of their manufacturer specifications, any 2 float compartments can be submerged and the airplane still float itself. It may not take off, but at least it'll still be floating. Starting with the front of the float, just like a boat, we call the front of the float the bow, and we have a bow bumper on the very front, and of course that's the mooring cleat on the top of the deck. The flat part of the part we walk on here we call the deck. And then we have the chine, which runs the outer edge of the float. It's kind of hard to see here in the water, but the edge that separates the side of the float from the bottom of the float, we refer to this edge here as a chine. Okay, along the bottom of the float we have what's called the step. And the reason the float planes have the step is it kind of gives us some hydrodynamic boosting. It allows us to separate the majority of the hull from the water, which allows us to get up and minimize drag, which would allow us to accelerate to our takeoff speed. Without the step in the float, we would never be able to accelerate to takeoff speed. The floats are these little square things on the side of the floats. That's where the beaching gear, I have a set of landing gear that hooks into that, and we can pull it out for maintenance. Coming to the back of the float, we call this the after body. From the step back, we call this the after body. And of course we have the cables and pulleys which operate the water rudder mechanisms. Water rudders, we use that for idle taxi steering. They're interconnected to the air rudder, so when you move your rudder pedals back and forth, it moves the water rudders back and forth. Prior to takeoff, we lift these water rudders up so that we don't tear one off on takeoff. 3 types of taxiing in a seaplane: idle taxi, plow taxi, and step taxi. The majority of the time we're either idle taxiing or step taxiing. Plow taxiing is something that we do like maybe during a run-up with the nose up, kind of plowing, or in a high wind situation where we're trying to turn downwind. So that kind of makes up the floats, and of course we have the struts down here, which are basically just exactly what they look like: the forward strut, the diagonal strut, and the rear strut. Just exactly as they appear. And those buckets sitting on the floats there, those catch the leftover oil from the bottom cylinders. The oil drains in those buckets, and then we pour it back into the engine. Okay, so that pretty much makes up the floats, the pieces and parts of the floats. Once you get your seaplane rating and you rush home to go buy yourself a seaplane, you might ask yourself, what size floats do I need to buy? Well, the FAA says that one float has to support 80% of the gross weight of the aircraft. So just remember, one float needs to support 80% of the gross weight of the airplane. However, in the industry, sometimes even 100% is better. So if you got a 3,000 pound airplane, you need to at least get a 3,000 pound float.